never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Tom, and I'm 56 years old. My wife, Laura, and I have been married for 30 years. Or at least we were. Honestly, after everything that's happened, I don't even know how to define our relationship anymore. To outsiders, we had a great life. We raised 2 amazing kids, both out of the house now, and built a comfortable life together. We've gone through the usual ups and downs, but I thought we were solid. Laura and I were that couple who always made it work. Or so I thought. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs earlier. Over the last year, Laura started to change. She began spending more time out with friends, or going on random trips she'd never been interested in before. She was glued to her phone constantly, which wasn't like her. I'd ask who she was texting, and she'd laugh it off, saying it was just a book club group chat. The biggest shift, though, was in how she treated me. Laura has always been opinionated, one of the things I admired about her when we first met. But over the past few months, she'd turned mean. Everything I did annoyed her. She'd snap at me over the smallest things, like how I folded the laundry or forgot to buy her favorite creamer. At first, I chalked it up to stress or maybe menopause. I tried talking to her, but she brushed me off, saying I was overthinking it. "Not everything is about you, Tom," she'd say, rolling her eyes. So, I let it go, hoping things would smooth out. But deep down, something felt off. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was going on with Laura wasn't just about stress. Something bigger was brewing. I just didn't know what yet. The discovery came in the most humiliating way possible. Last month, Laura announced she was going on a weekend spa retreat with her friends. She packed her bags with more enthusiasm than I'd seen in months and even hummed to herself while getting ready. I remember thinking maybe this trip would help her relax and things would go back to normal. That Friday night, I was sitting in the living room, flipping through channels when my son, Adam, called. He just moved to a new city for work and wanted to catch up. We were talking about his new apartment when he casually mentioned something that stopped me cold. "By the way, Dad," Adam said, "I saw Mom's Instagram story earlier. Who's that guy she's with?" I thought she was on a spa retreat. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What guy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She posted a picture of some guy," Adam replied. "They were having dinner. Looked cozy." After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, my stomach in knots. Laura had never been big on Instagram, but she'd recently started posting more. I grabbed my phone and opened her profile. Sure enough, there it was. A photo of Laura at a fancy restaurant, smiling across the table at a guy who looked like he was in his mid-20s. The caption read, "Perfect end to a relaxing day, cherry blossom." My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. Who was this guy? And why was my wife having dinner with him on her supposed spa weekend? I clicked on his profile. His name was Jason, and his bio was full of gym selfies and motivational quotes. He looked like the kind of guy who spends more on protein powder than rent. I scrolled through his posts and found more pictures of him and Laura, at the gym, at a coffee shop, even at what looked like a beach house. My heart sank. This wasn't just some random dinner. Laura had been seeing this guy for weeks, maybe months, and she hadn't even tried to hide it, at least not from the world outside our marriage. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, flipping between anger, disbelief, and a sickening sense of betrayal. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her with Jason, laughing, touching, sharing the kind of moments we used to have. By morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront her. But first, I needed to prepare myself for what I was about to face. Laura came home Sunday evening, looking radiant. She walked in the door humming, her face flushed like she'd had the time of her life. She barely acknowledged me, dumping her bag by the stairs and heading straight to the kitchen for a glass of wine. I followed her, my heart pounding. "How was the spa retreat?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned and smiled, that fake sweet smile she'd been perfecting lately. "Oh, it was wonderful. So relaxing. Just what I needed." I felt a surge of anger. "Really? Because Adam mentioned seeing your Instagram. You looked pretty cozy at dinner with some guy named Jason." Her smile vanished. She blinked at me, her face unreadable, before finally setting down her glass. "Oh, for God's sake, Tom. Don't be so dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "Jason is just a friend. He was in the area and we caught up. That's it." "Just a friend," I snapped, my voice rising. "Then why are there pictures of you two all over his Instagram? At the gym, at the beach? This isn't just a random dinner, Laura. How long has this been going on?" Her expression hardened, and for a moment, I saw something ugly flash in her eyes. "You've been stalking me now?" she shot back, her voice icy. "That's pathetic, Tom. No wonder I needed some space." The deflection only made me angrier. "Don't you dare turn this around on me," I said, stepping closer. "You've been lying to me, sneaking around with some kid half your age, and I'm the bad guy? I want the truth, Laura. Right now." She sighed dramatically, as if I were an annoying child pestering her. "Fine," she said, throwing her hands up. "Yes, I've been seeing Jason, but it's not what you think. He makes me feel alive again, Tom. Something you haven't done in years." Her words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. "Alive," I echoed. "We've been married for 30 years, Laura. We raised a family together, built a life, and you throw it all away for some gym rat because he makes you feel alive?" She shrugged, her expression cold. "I don't expect you to understand. You've been so boring, so predictable. Jason, he's exciting. He reminds me of who I used to be." My blood was boiling. "Who you used to be? Laura, you're a grown woman sneaking around with a boy who probably calls you ma'am when he's not screwing you. Is that who you want to be?" Her face twisted with rage. "You don't get it, Tom. You never have. This marriage has been dead for years. You were just too blind to see it." The words stung, but I couldn't let her rewrite history. "No," I said firmly. "This marriage died when you decided to betray me. Don't put this on me, Laura. You made this choice." She stared at me, her eyes cold and unfeeling. "Maybe I did," she said finally. "And maybe it was the best choice I've ever made." I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just turned and walked out of the kitchen, her words echoing in my head like a death knell. After that confrontation, I didn't know what to feel. It was like every emotion, anger, sadness, humiliation, and disbelief, was fighting for space in my chest, suffocating me. I spent that night on the couch, staring at the ceiling and replaying Laura's words in my head. This marriage has been dead for years. How could she say that? I thought we were happy or at least comfortable. Sure, we'd had rough patches, but what couple doesn't after 30 years? The worst part was the sheer cruelty of it all. Laura didn't just cheat. She tore down everything we'd built together without a second thought. She didn't apologize or show any remorse. She acted like I was the problem, like I was the reason she had to go find excitement in the arms of some boy who probably didn't even understand what real commitment was. Couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Jason, laughing, touching, doing God knows what. It made me sick to my stomach. How long had I been a joke to her? How long had I been living in a lie while she played out her midlife crisis? The next morning, I couldn't even look at her. She came downstairs like nothing had happened, made herself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table scrolling through her phone. No guilt, no shame. It was like I didn't exist. When she finally noticed me, she sighed dramatically. "Are you going to sulk all day, Tom? Because I don't have the energy for it." Her words hit me like a slap. I clenched my jaw, fighting back the urge to scream. "Sulk?" I said quietly. "You destroy our marriage, and I'm sulking?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. People grow apart, Tom. It happens. Maybe it's time you accept that." I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving her sitting there without another word. I drove aimlessly for hours trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. By the time I got home, I felt hollow. I didn't even care if she was still there or not. All I wanted was for the pain to stop. Over the next few days, I fell into a fog. I went to work, came home, and avoided Laura as much as possible. Every time I saw her, It was like a dagger twisting in my chest. She acted so nonchalant, like she'd already moved on, while I was drowning in grief over the loss of the life we'd built together. I wasn't just mourning the marriage. I was mourning the person I thought Laura was. The woman I'd fallen in love with 3 decades ago wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have lied to my face, cheated on me, and then blamed me for her actions. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I'd ever feel whole again. As I was trying to navigate the fog of heartbreak and betrayal, something unexpected happened. Jason showed up at my door. It was a Tuesday evening. I'd just gotten home from work, exhausted and emotionally drained, when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened it cautiously, only to find Jason standing there, looking sheepish and uncomfortable. Mr. Reynolds?" he said, his voice unsure. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I almost slammed the door in his face right then and there. The nerve of this kid to show up at my house after everything. But something about his expression stopped me. He didn't look smug or defiant, he looked scared. "What the hell do you want?" I said, my voice cold. He scratched the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I need to tell you something. It's about Laura." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my temper in check. "You've got 2 minutes. Jason hesitated, then blurted out, "I didn't know she was married. Not at first, anyway." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "She told me she was divorced," he said quickly. "That she'd been out of a bad marriage for years. I only found out the truth a couple of weeks ago, but by then, I was already in too deep." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Why are you telling me this now?" he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I can't do this anymore. She's not who I thought she was. She's been lying to me too. About a lot of things." I narrowed my eyes. "What kind of things?" Jason hesitated again, then looked me straight in the eye. "She said you were abusive, that you made her feel trapped. That's why I stayed with her, even after I found out she was married. I thought I was helping her escape a bad situation." My stomach churned with a mix of anger and disbelief. "And now?" He looked down at his feet, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now I realize she was just using me. She's manipulative, man. She twists everything to make herself the victim. I didn't see it at first, but now, I don't know. I just felt like you should know." I didn't know whether to be furious with him or grateful for his honesty. "So, what do you want from me?" I asked, my voice flat. "Nothing," he said quickly. "I'm done with her. I figured you deserved the truth. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, completely dumbfounded. When I closed the door, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was furious that Laura had stooped so low as to paint me as some kind of monster. On the other hand, Jason's words confirmed what I'd started to suspect. Laura wasn't just unfaithful. She was a master manipulator. That night, I sat down and started making a list. Not just of the lies she'd told me, but of all the ways she'd undermined our marriage over the years. It was a sobering exercise, but it also gave me clarity. I realized then that this wasn't just about the affair. It was about who Laura had become, and the fact that I didn't know her anymore. Or maybe I never really did. Jason's visit shook me, but it also gave me a sense of clarity. For the first time, I saw Laura for who she really was. Someone who manipulated and lied to get what she wanted, no matter who she hurt in the process. The next morning, Laura sauntered into the kitchen as if nothing had happened. She poured herself a cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone, completely indifferent to the turmoil she'd caused. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She glanced up, her eyes narrowing. "About what now?" I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was Jason's Instagram, the one with all the pictures of them together. "I had a visit from your boy Toy last night," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Her face hardened, but she didn't flinch. "And what did he say?" she asked, her tone dismissive. "Enough," I replied. Enough to confirm what I've known for weeks. You've been lying to me not just about the affair, but about everything. You told him I was abusive, Laura. You tried to make me the villain. She rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair. Oh, please. I told him what I needed to tell him to make him stay. Don't act so self-righteous, Tom. You're not exactly a saint. Her words were like a slap to the face. I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. Do you even hear yourself? I asked. You've destroyed our marriage, humiliated me, and now you're just… What? Justifying it? Blaming me? She shrugged, taking a sip of her coffee. If you want to play the victim, be my guest. But don't pretend you didn't see this coming. Our marriage has been over for years. That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no coming back from this. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head. After everything we've been through, after everything we've built, this is how you end it? With lies and betrayal? She smirked, her eyes cold. Oh, grow up, Tom. People change. Relationships change. You just couldn't keep up. Her words cut deep, but they also solidified my resolve. I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. We're done, Laura, I said. I've already contacted a lawyer. Consider this your notice. For the first time, her confidence faltered. You're serious? She asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Dead serious, I replied. You made your choice, Laura. Now I'm making mine. I left the house that morning and didn't look back. As I drove to work, I felt a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The pain was still there, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let Laura's betrayal define me. It was time to start over, no matter how much it hurt. After that final confrontation, Laura's true colors shone even brighter. She didn't just accept the divorce quietly. She made it as messy as possible. The next day, I came home to find that she'd taken all the framed family photos off the walls and stuffed them into garbage bags in the garage. It felt petty and cruel, as if she was trying to erase our shared history. A week later, I noticed money missing from our joint account. When I confronted her, she smirked and said, "Consider it a little compensation for the years I wasted in this dead marriage." My lawyer was furious when I told him and immediately filed paperwork to freeze the account. Meanwhile, Laura started spreading rumors among our friends and family. She painted me as controlling, boring, and emotionally neglectful. The poor husband who drove her into the arms of another man. I'd get texts from mutual friends, asking if what she said was true. Some were supportive, but others clearly believed her lies. The worst part was how it affected our kids. Adam and our daughter, Sophie, were both adults now, but that didn't make it any easier. Laura tried to spin the story to them too, saying I'd failed her as a husband and that the affair was a symptom of our broken marriage. But Adam wasn't buying it. "Dad," he said during one phone call, "I've seen how you've treated Mom over the years. You've done everything for her. If she can't appreciate that, it's on her." Sophie, on the other hand, was more conflicted. "Mom's been telling me some things that don't add up," she said cautiously. "I don't know what to believe." I didn't blame her for being confused. Laura had always been good at playing the victim. But it hurt all the same knowing my own daughter doubted me. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, Laura's vindictiveness only escalated. She demanded half of everything, even things she had no attachment to, like my tools in the garage and the old vinyl records she'd always made fun of. It wasn't about what she wanted. It was about making my life miserable. But through it all, I stayed focused. I documented everything. Her withdrawals from the account, her texts, even the rumors she was spreading. My lawyer called her tactics scorched earth. And while it made the process more painful, it also made her look worse in court. The stress was overwhelming at times. There were days I felt like giving up, like it would be easier to just let her have everything and move on. But then I'd remember Jason's words. She twists everything to make herself the victim. That was her game, and I wasn't going to let her win. The fallout was ugly, but it also showed me who really had my back. Adam stood by me every step of the way, and even Sophie eventually came around. "I've been talking to Adam," she said one day, her voice hesitant. "And I think Mom's been lying to me." Hearing that was bittersweet. I hated that my kids were caught in the middle of this mess, but I was relieved that they were starting to see the truth. By the time the dust started to settle, I realized something important. Laura could take the photos, the money, even the memories we'd built together. But she couldn't take my integrity, and she couldn't take the people who truly cared about me. Just when I thought the chaos with Laura couldn't get any worse, a surprising ally came out of nowhere. Jason. I hadn't heard from him since the night he showed up at my door, but a few weeks later, he sent me a message on Facebook. "Mr. Reynolds, I know we didn't part on great terms, but I've been thinking about what Laura's done to both of us. If you need any help proving your case, I've got evidence." At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. Could I trust him? After all, he'd been part of the problem. But my lawyer encouraged me to meet with him. "If he has proof that supports your claims, it could make a big difference," she said. We met at a coffee shop a few days later. Jason looked nervous, like he wasn't sure if I was going to yell at him or shake his hand. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "I've been going through my texts and emails with Laura. There's a lot here that I think you should see." I opened the envelope and started flipping through the pages. It was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Screenshots of Laura bragging about using our joint account, texts where she admitted to lying to our kids about me, and even a few messages where she gloated about milking this divorce for all it's worth. There were also receipts, literal receipts. Plane tickets for trips she told me were girls' weekends, hotel stays with Jason, and extravagant purchases she'd made with money she'd siphoned from our account. "This is a lot," I said, my voice thick with disbelief. Jason nodded. I didn't know how manipulative she was until things started falling apart between us. "She lied to me too, Mr. Reynolds. I'm sorry for my part in all this." For the first time, I felt a twinge of pity for him. He'd been a pawn in Laura's game just like I had. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess I just want to make things right. She's hurt enough people already." I shook his hand before I left, and as much as I hated to admit it, I was grateful for his help. That evidence turned out to be a game changer. My lawyer used it to challenge Laura's financial claims, expose her lies in court, and even refute some of the rumors she'd been spreading about me. When Laura found out Jason had turned against her, she went ballistic. She stormed into the house one afternoon while I was packing up my things, shouting about how Jason was a traitor and how I was pathetic for teaming up with him. "You've got no one left to manipulate, Laura," I said calmly, meeting her furious gaze. "The truth is finally catching up to you." For the first time, she seemed genuinely rattled. She stormed out of the house without another word, slamming the door behind her. As messy as it was, Jason's intervention marked a turning point. For the first time in months, I felt like I was regaining control of my life. Laura's web of lies was unraveling, and I was finally beginning to see a way out of the nightmare she'd created. The final hearing for the divorce felt like both an ending and a beginning. Thanks to Jason's evidence, my lawyer dismantled Laura's claims piece by piece. The court saw through her attempts to paint herself as the victim. Her lies about me being abusive, the judge dismissed them outright when confronted with contradictory texts where she bragged about manipulating our kids. Her demands for half of everything, including my tools and records, denied, thanks to receipts proving she'd been siphoning money for months. By the end of it, Laura's once smug and confident demeanor had crumbled. For the first time, she looked defeated. The court awarded me the majority of our assets, including the house, and ordered Laura to repay some of the money she'd taken from our joint account. She'd also have to pay her own legal fees, a decision that left her fuming. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. Adam was waiting for me outside, and when I told him the outcome, he grinned and clapped me on the back. "You deserved this, Dad," he said. "It's about time someone put her in her place." Sophie, who'd been quieter throughout the process, called me later that night. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she said. "Mom's been different lately. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner." "It's okay," I told her. "She's still your mother, Sophie. I don't expect you to take sides." But hearing her admit she'd come to see the truth was a relief. For months, I'd felt like Laura had taken everything from me. My home, my dignity, even my relationship with my daughter. Now I was finally getting it all back. Laura, on the other hand, moved out of town not long after the divorce was finalized. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to rekindle things with Jason, but he wanted nothing to do with her. Apparently, he'd seen enough of her true nature to walk away for good. As for me, I stayed in the house and began to rebuild. It wasn't easy, starting over at 56. But every day felt like a step in the right direction. I threw myself into hobbies I'd neglected over the years. Woodworking, fishing, even reconnecting with old friends I hadn't seen in ages. The hardest part was learning to trust again. Not just other people, but myself. Laura's betrayal had shaken me to my core, making me doubt my instincts and my ability to see people for who they really were. But with time, I started to heal. One day, while sorting through old boxes, I found a photo from our wedding. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how that young couple had ended up here. Then I tucked it back into the box and closed the lid. The past was the past. It was time to move forward. It's been a year since the divorce was finalized, and my life looks completely different now. It's not perfect. Starting over at my age is no walk in the park. But it's mine. And for the first time in decades, I feel free. Looking back, I've realized a lot about myself and the relationship I had with Laura. I used to blame myself for not noticing the signs sooner, for staying in a marriage that was clearly falling apart long before the affair. But I've come to understand that staying wasn't weakness, it was hope. I believed in us, in the family we'd built, and in the promises we made to each other. There's no shame in that. What I've also realized is that Laura wasn't the woman I thought she was, not for a long time, if ever. She's someone who thrives on control, manipulation, and playing the victim. It wasn't just about the affair or the lies. It was about how little she valued the life we built together. But I refused to let her actions define me. The relationship with my kids has been one of the brightest spots in all of this. Adam, ever the rock, has stayed by my side throughout it all. Sophie, after some initial hesitation, has become closer to me than ever. She's even started coming to me for advice, something I never thought I'd experience again after Laura's smear campaign. As for Laura, I hear bits and pieces about her now and then. She's living in another state, bouncing from one short-term relationship to the next. Part of me feels sorry for her. She's chasing something she'll probably never find. But mostly, I'm just glad she's not my problem anymore. I've even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it's been nice. Meeting new people, sharing stories, and laughing in a way I hadn't in years. I don't know if I'll ever remarry, but I do know that I won't let Laura's betrayal stop me from opening myself up to someone new. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to break you. It's painful and it forces you to question everything, but it also gives you the chance to rebuild. Stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. For anyone reading this who's going through something similar, my advice is simple. Trust your instincts, hold on to your integrity, and don't be afraid to let go of someone who doesn't value you. The pain will fade, and one day you'll find yourself standing on the other side of it, stronger than you ever thought possible. I still have bad days, but they're fewer and farther between now. And when I think about the life I've reclaimed, I know one thing for certain. I'm finally free, and that's worth everything. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.